Hi, thank you so much for joining us. This is another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm your host, Bridget Burns, Executive Director of the University Innovation Alliance.
Oh, sorry.
And that is Doug Lederman, who is the editor of Inside Higher Ed and co-founder.
Sorry about that.
That's cool. I did that for you.
Something took over my computer, so I had I was hearing music instead of your mellifluous voice.
Oh, well, it's cool. Well, we're live television, folks. This is how it happens. So, I'm super delighted. And for folks at home, if this is your first episode, Start the Week with Wisdom is a weekly show that we hold here on Inside Higher Ed that is uplifting and amplifying voices of leaders at university presidents and systems and chancellors. And today we're really excited to have someone who's the head of a very prominent association. And the real purpose here is to give you a bit of hope and perspective and optimism for the week and elevate, hopefully, not a case of the Mondays, the opposite of the case of the Mondays. So that's what we mean by Start the Week with Wisdom.
And this person definitely she's probably closer to a Friday, getting ready for to have some fun. We're bringing in Mildred Garcia, who's president of the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. She was the first Latina to lead one of the 6 major presidential higher education associations in Washington. She was previously president of Cal State Fullerton and Cal State Dominguez Hills, and she's a powerhouse. So welcome, Millie.
Thank you so much. Glad to be with you.
We're so excited, especially because you bring such a breadth of perspective that I just don't think exists anywhere else in higher ed. So excited to talk to you about leadership, but really, I feel like you can speak to every sector, every position, and especially with the number of presidents that you've actually helped to mentor and support along the way. It's going to be a great conversation. So we usually like to kick off the day by just trying to settle the ball and see kind of how are you holding in right now? How are you hanging in? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, especially because my sister's visiting. We both have our vaccines and we spent the weekend together, and she'll leave tomorrow morning. But what a wonderful time to be able to see people after the vaccine, after being cooped up and not seeing anybody. And now I can get hugs from my family.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I can't wait to meet a person, just a single person. So yeah, that's great to hear. So you're based in DC right now? Are you currently in DC?
I am Chevy Chase, 2 blocks away from DC,
okay.
They say, in the DMV area.
Yes. Okay, great. So I just want to kind of ask you a little bit about your transition. So you have been president of multiple institutions. You've worked in all these different sectors. You really have this experience that, like I said, is unprecedented. And then you come into a role that is the leader of an association, which I think is that's a very different, it's a different role. It's a different type of leadership because you're leading leaders. And I'm just wondering if there was anything, that surprised you about that transition, or if there was any one particular experience that you think best prepared you for this.
I think what best prepared me was working in the different sectors, quite frankly. I've been at the community colleges, I've been at the comprehensive, the research intensive, and the for-profit. And so I was able to learn from each of those sectors to prepare me to be with leaders from across the country in all of our states, almost 400 institutions. They're just wonderful people. So it was a hard decision to make, but it was the right decision for me at that particular point in my career.
Millie, I'm curious what you think about the role of an association like AASCU being today, because it is one of the sort of structural organizations within higher education, but it doesn't have a lot of power. It doesn't have a lot of, it can't really tell anybody what to do particularly. So I'm curious sort of how you see an organization like yours leading, and how leading an organization like that, how you think about leading an organization like that.
It's all about, for me at AASCU, it's about the students. It's who we serve and how do you help presidents and their teams be the best that they can be, and also being out there talking about this comprehensive state college and university that is so not known as much. They keep putting us together with all the other sectors without understanding who we are. And so it's being the voice for state colleges and universities, the comprehensive ones. And it's also helping leaders and preparing new leaders to, what I say, to serve the new majority. They go to these four-year institutions, the first gen, the students of color, the low-income students, the adults who go to these regional comprehensive institutions to look and seek a better life.
That's great. And we really are going to lean on AASCU institutions, I think, going into the future. I think people are really becoming cognizant in a new way of just how much we need to step up in terms of, we've always needed to serve, especially adult learners, but now it becomes, I think the sense of urgency and the sense of clarity about how this needs to not be an afterthought. It needs to not be something that's on the margin. It needs to be something much more central to all institutions. I think that's becoming clear. So I want to know if, Doug touched on leading an association and how that's different, but I'm actually just curious about if you're finding that institutions need something different from associations in the pandemic than they did prior. Like for me at the UIA, I'm definitely noticing a different type of need in terms of professional development, and obviously everything's virtual, but there's some stuff that people don't need anymore, and there's some stuff that people are going to need now more. And so I'm just wondering if you're experiencing that, and if there's anything that you can share broadly.
Yeah, broadly, what we're seeing is because of the pandemic, a lot of our institutions were not completely online, right? So how do you prepare individuals to teach online, to measure learning online, to really follow up and help students learn online? That's one thing. The other thing is that leaders want to know how to have those difficult discussions on racial justice, right? And not be seen as racist or insensitive, but to really have those deep conversations that we must have about equity, about economic justice, about racial justice, right? And so having those opportunities where they can actually let their hair down and be vulnerable with among themselves and learn how to move their institutions forward. And it's a different context in every different part of the country, but it is something that leaders really want to learn more how to.
Again, just thinking a little bit more about your role at an association like AASCU, it's always struck me the challenge of getting institutions to work together and to do things together. You've been in systems, obviously, where that's much more natural, like in Cal State, but a lot of AASCU institutions are, if not complete free agents, they may be part of a system, but they're pretty loosely affiliated. And I'm curious what you would, first of all, do you agree that sort of we're increasingly at moments where individual institutions are going to have a harder time sort of being fully functional on their own, and that cross-institutional meaningful collaboration is going to be increasingly important? If so, how do you get presidents, or how might you encourage presidents to be thinking about that, and to being willing to work with a peer institution, maybe without as much fear of competition, and be more collaborative versus competitive?
Well, number one is there's a crisis. And when there's a crisis, people tend to come together. That's number one. But number two, at the very core of AASCU institutions is student success and the changing demographics in this country. And each one of these presidents that I've been working with are very committed to how to learn from each other and how to work with each other in order to really serve the student body that it was in with their region. It's the right thing to do for them, but it's also survival for them to learn on how to take care of that new community in your neighborhood, right? To learn how to work with another institution to put together a degree that may be in the same region. It's all about that, serving your region, being stewards of place, as well as survival for your institution as we move into this very difficult time. We're not out of this yet.
That's super great. And I think that you can encourage institutions to come together and lean on each other, because I think partially because of your experience working at so many different institutions. Like I bet you've heard every excuse possible about how we serve different students, or, what could we possibly have in common? So I'm sure you can overcome those objections. But I want to shift to the presidency and leadership and what you have learned and observed over time. So I know that you have actually helped nurture and mentor many people who become presidents. And I'm curious about the way that you've done that. And you and I were talking briefly prior about how you think that there's one particular thing they really need to do or if there's one thing or a few things that they need to do before deciding to become a president. If you could share with us your perspective on that.
People think that being a president is glamorous, and people really have to sit down and think about why they want to be a president. It is a tough job, but it's a very rewarding job. It's 24/7. You're dealing with crisis. It's not if a crisis will happen during your presidency, it's when. And so you have to start to think about why, what I call scrubbing your heart and soul and going inner and thinking through, why do I want to be a president? What is my North Star? And where will my skills and talents match with an institution? To stop thinking about this elitism of being at the top institution in the country, but think about who you're serving and who you are going to be working alongside with. Presidents don't have all that power. It is about working alongside people and talking about a collaborative vision and moving the mission. And people need to kind of think through, is this the right job for me? And I've worked with people that have said, after shadowing you, I think I'll stay being either the provost or a faculty member. I'm fine, thank you very much. And that's okay too. We need people everywhere.
Do you think the traits that we need in college university presidents, let's particularly, I guess, institution presidencies at institutions that serve post-traditional students, do you think the traits and the skills have changed or by the pandemic, by the moment we're in, compared to pre?
Oh my God, I think the president has changed, at least in my lifetime, in the 3 presidencies that I've had, tremendously. But it is about always going back to your North Star, right? And for me, it's always been, I want to serve first-gen students of color, low income, people that came from where I came from the housing projects of Brooklyn. That's what I wanted to do. And so for me, it is about meeting students where they are, setting those standards high, but helping them meet those standards. It's no longer the best and the brightest get admitted, but those who have the drive, that are committed, that you teach them how to be good students and help them become educated citizens in a democracy. That is what we're doing. And if we don't educate this new majority, this country's in trouble. It's not only bad for the student, it's bad for the state and the country, because that's the new majority of America.
I completely agree. And thanks we're getting some great comments from folks who are watching. I do want to ask you, so we had talked earlier about how one of the things that you really recommend folks do prior to becoming president is they really need to figure out and learn how to handle a crisis, and especially right now, right? Like, I completely agree with you that anchoring and understanding why you want to be president is essential. I mean, from my perspective, presidents are they're their best right now. It doesn't feel like it, because a lot of the trappings went away, and it's really called a lot of people to draw deep on their courage and lead in a way that, it really brought the leader out in a lot of folks. And I'm just wondering about that crisis experience that you're talking about what do you tell people about how to prepare, or how do you center yourself when you're in the midst of a crisis? I'm just wondering, like, what advice have you been giving folks about navigating this moment and just broadly about a crisis?
It's really your personal anchor. It's knowing yourself to stay calm, to always remember that people are looking to you to help people throughout a crisis. You are never 100% prepared, and you are never prepared. This COVID crisis, there is no rule book. So it's, how do you bring people together? How do you bring them hope? How do you lead them through? And how do you work with your team to move people through this crisis. For me, it was 9/11. I was on my way to work, 4 days being a president, on the George Washington Bridge. And when I finally was able to get to that Manhattan campus, it was bringing all the people together in that lobby. And I actually didn't know what I was doing. I was a president for 4 days, and I basically just took a deep breath and I said, we'll get through this together. Let's all hold hands. And we had everybody in the lobby. And I said, I don't know if you pray or not. Do what you do to keep yourself centered, but we are going to get through this together. And that whole 2 months was awful because we had bomb scares. People were thinking we were going to do we have tanks in the street in Manhattan, and it was awful. But it is about how do you keep yourself centered and always remember you are serving as a president. I believe in servant leadership. So you are serving, you are protecting, you are trying to keep your community safe in order for them to be able to learn and move on.
That's super powerful. Well, I just, I didn't know that. I didn't know that your experience, and I think that's really helpful because especially as COVID first hit, I remember that folks were reaching out to the former president of Tulane to talk about what it was like during the hurricane, and so I'm thinking about how other leaders who have led through past crisis have stepped up to provide guidance in this moment. Have you had a lot of folks reaching out to you, and is there other advice beyond centering yourself and focusing on the students you need to serve and trying to stay calm? Are there other pieces of advice that you found yourself giving throughout the year that you think you would share with our audience?
I said to them, use your teams. If you should have built a really strong team so that you're not the only one working in a large institution, helping your institution get through it. Listen to the silences. People are hurting out there. And it's not only your students, it's your staff and faculty as well. And you need to don't only listen to the ones that scream the loudest. Listen to the silences of your community.
Do you think, Bridget mentioned you having mentored and helped a number of other people become presidents? Are there things about your leadership style that you feel like you've particularly been able to pass on or encourage that has led what it seems like a decent number of people who you've worked closely with to go on to presidencies? Is that something you purposefully have done, and are there certain ways you've gone about it?
So I learned very early on as a chief student affairs officer at Ostos Community College in the South Bronx. That president taught us how to work together as a team, the collaboration, getting rid of silos. And that has stayed, and we accomplished so very much, even though it was the South Bronx and it was not the preferred institution of CUNY at the time. And yet we were able to accomplish so much because she held us accountable. She held us accountable to working collaboratively without silos. And for me, that has been my success. And I always say no president does this alone. And that it has to be a team, that you have to each know each other, build that trust, look at your mission, set goals together, know what each other needs from each other in order to reach those goals, and hold people accountable. And
Can I just sorry. I just want to ask one thing about that, because how do you know, this is not something we typically talk about, but how do you know when somebody isn't right? Like if you've got a group, let's say either it's somebody you inherited or somebody who wasn't what you might have thought they were when they're hired, given how important it is to work together as a team, what are the things you look for and when somebody isn't right, and how do you handle that?
Well, when they're not sharing information. When you sit down with, I have meetings one-on-one with each vice president, even today, and say, how's it going? How's your goals going? Are you accomplishing everything? And they'll let me know. And then And one may say, well, so-and-so didn't give me information. And you start to pick up from these one-on-one meetings. And when you get together and you talk about the goals and you say, well, student affairs, I need from you this, and vice president and provost, I need from you this. And then you follow up and you say, did you ever get that project done? You start to hear, and you have to observe as a leader, and you have to hold them accountable. And when you see it's not happening, for me, I love baseball. My father brought me up on the Yankees. I am from New York. So strike one, I speak to you. Strike two, I put it in writing. And strike three, you're out. And I tell everybody I hire, if you can't collaborate, if you're a lone ranger, you're not going to be successful, and I will fire you.
Snap. Do not mess with Millie. I like it. I like this. I like the seriousness. Yes.
I have a young lady that I love to death. She was my graduate assistant at Arizona State. She followed me and she wanted to work with me at Fullerton. And I said to her, Marianne, you know how I am. Don't make me fire you. And she says that now she's off being a vice president somewhere else. She'll be a president someday. She says, I always remember you telling me, I'm coming back, but don't make me fire you. It's about collaboration.
I love it. So you and I, the first time I ever was introduced to you, it was from afar. You were receiving an award on stage, and I saw. So that was just, you know, you probably don't remember this, but I just remember you had so many colleagues that were saying so many incredible things about you. And I don't remember if you were at Dominguez Hills or which institution you were at, but so my first experience was really understanding how beloved you were in California in particular, and amongst your colleagues in the CSUs. And but my second interaction really with you has been as part of the California Recovery with Equity Taskforce. And I bet that had to be unique for you because now you sit in this national role. It's very unusual that a state was willing to go through this kind of effort, but you actually know a lot more about California, and you have great relationships with folks there in a way that I didn't. So my experience from that task force was very positive, and I just kept wondering why other states don't do something similar. And I just wanted, if you wanted to reflect on that experience, given the depth and breadth of your experience in California, but now being able to come from afar and be able to kind of coach as a national expert, if you had anything to share.
No, I thought that was a really smart move for California to start thinking about post-COVID and how to move forward the entire state of higher education. There were some really deep discussions there. I was able to be a little bit more out there because I am no longer working there, right? But I remember no system is perfect. And if we really want to change, we have to hear where we're not perfect. And I thought that during those conversations, we were able to talk about it. And quite frankly, you know, I think the master plan was good at that time, but times have changed. And we have to move away from the elitism of higher ed and holding people in buckets and allow the new majority to move seamlessly through the system, the public system, in California and throughout the country.
Love it. And so that's our plug. Other states, I hope that you replicate this work. We had Londe on here, and so we're hoping to push that message. So my last question is always intended to try and leave kind of breadcrumbs for others. Is there a book that you find yourself recommending to other leaders or people who are aspiring to leadership that has served you the best?
There are so many books right now. But you're talking about what has led me with a book. It's probably servant leadership from way back when. How to serve, that these jobs are serving. It's not about accolades. If that's what you really want, this is the wrong business for you. It is about working with people. The other books that I think are so important right now is How to Be a Leader and Having Deep Discussions on Issues of Economic and Racial Justice, and preparing students to live in a democracy, which is now multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic. And all of those books, How to Be an Anti-Racist is one of them. I'm now going to read This is the Fire. I am rereading James Baldwin, The Fire, next time, because we have to learn how to have these very deep, difficult dialogues if we are truly going to be leaders in our diverse institutions, engaging our communities in those discussions.
Perfect. So for folks, that's great. Giving us some homework. I'm so grateful that you spent this time with us, President Garcia. You've had such a distinguished career, and I love that you are so committed to planting seeds and inspiring others. We are really in need of strong leadership, and I appreciate that you're not just modeling it, but you're also making sure others, especially diverse leaders, can follow you. So thanks for spending this time with us, and hopefully those at home, you got a little bit of a taste, and there's plenty more if you want to hear from President Garcia. I actually was listening to another podcast she was on, and we will make sure to post contact information for AASCU. Is there anywhere that you would like folks to connect with you, as other than we'll just send folks to the website? Or
my email is presg@ascu.org is my email. And for those who want to be presidents, don't forget the Millennium Leadership Institute, 22 years of existence, preparing a diverse group of people to enter our institutions as presidents, and our Emerging Leaders Program. Issues of race, diversity, equity, and inclusion are at the core of every one of our professional development programs.
Okay, I'm making sure to type that up there. So, okay, great. So folks should definitely check those out. And otherwise, thank you so much for spending the day with us, and for Doug being an excellent co-host. Next Monday, we will have our 1-year anniversary of kicking off Weekly Wisdom with our original guest, the OG, President Michael Crow from Arizona State University. So we will see you same time, same place. And otherwise, have a wonderful week, everyone.